Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Washington, D.C. Joining us now from Florida is Paul Craig Roberts. He was an assistant secretary of the Treasury Department under the Reagan administration. He was an associate editor of the Wall Street Journal. Welcome, Mr. Roberts, and tell me your column again.
I do a syndicated column for Creative Syndicate in Los Angeles.
You've written recently about the trial of Khalid Shaikh Mohammed in New York. Give us your take. The right wing has been condemning bringing him to New York City as a threat to security. The civil rights community has sort of had mixed opinions. What's yours?
Well, I think the trial is a grave danger to Americans. To start with, under our criminal law, the case against him would have to be dismissed because he's been tortured and the government acknowledges that he's been tortured. But they're bringing him to trial anyhow. And so, and they're convinced that he will be convicted. And I suspect that's right. It's very hard to imagine a jury that would let off a person who has been widely demonized as the mastermind of 9/11. Any such juror who voted for acquittal wouldn't be able to go back to his neighborhood. And it's highly unlikely any federal judge would put his career on the line by permitting a trial that led to an acquittal. So the government's supposition that he will be found guilty is probably correct.
Now, their argument is that they have enough evidence that they gained outside of the torture to make the case.
Perhaps. But the fact that he was tortured itself is enough for dismissing the case against him. David Feige wrote a very interesting article, and he pointed out that the price that Mohammed will pay will be small compared to the price that our legal system will pay and the loss of protections that Americans have under the law. That will be the main victim of the trial. It, in my opinion, will complete the transformation of the American legal system.
Now, is this because it establishes a precedent that you can torture and still convict?
That's one of the things, yes, that you can torture and prosecute. There'll also be rulings, probably, that Mohammed's statements obtained by torture don't have to be suppressed. There'll probably be rulings that witnesses against him don't have to be produced. They'll claim national security or something. There'll be rulings that documents that compromise the prosecution will be redacted. At each stage of the appeals, higher courts will enshrine the rulings of the lower courts, and they will become legal precedents. And we will also lose the right to a speedy trial, habeas corpus. You know, the man didn't have habeas corpus. If they had such evidence against him, they wouldn't have needed to hold him all these years or to waterboard him. And what we will see in this trial is an undermining of every protective feature in the law that was the product of 1,000-year struggle, mainly achieved by the English. We inherited it as an English colony.
So going back, if you had this all to do over again, what is the first thing? Don't torture? How do you deal with these kinds of cases?
You don't arrest if you don't have good enough evidence that you can go before a judge for a warrant. How can you hold a person if you can't go? You don't have enough evidence to go to the court and say, look, here's the evidence. This is why we have it. Look at the Guantanamo detainees. You know, this is now a known fact. This isn't my opinion. There were almost 800 of those people, and almost all of them have been released. There was nothing against them. Hundreds of them were held for years and years. They lost years of their life. There was no case against them. See, the reason they're tortured is they don't have any evidence, and they're trying to get it through self-incrimination, which is impermissible under the Constitution.
So what do you
and
make of the
underwriting. So why did they have all these people? Now, if all these people were terrorists, why did they end up turning them loose? They're all, what, 80% of them or more is turned loose. They're talking about bringing cases against 14 out of, what was the figure, 780 people.
So what do you make of the argument, if one watches Fox News, and I'm prone to do it once in a while just to keep track, that quote unquote this is a war on terror, and once you declare somebody a combatant, an enemy combatant in this war on terror, even if they're American citizen apparently, if you listen to what they're saying about Fort Hood, then the constitutional rights no longer apply. You should treat them as one would on the battlefield, and that's the way you deal with terrorists. What do you make of that?
If you can declare somebody to be a terrorist when you don't have any evidence, then we're back into the medieval times when the robber barons could grab you and throw you in a prison. You'd be there the rest of your life and never have to tell anybody, never have to bring a case. This is an extremely dangerous thing. It's far more dangerous to Americans than terrorists. The terrorist can do very little, but the government that's not constrained by the Constitution can do all kinds of things. We have Joe Stalin, we have Adolf Hitler. They were far greater dangers to their populations than so-called external enemies.
What would you propose now that the people that are in Guantanamo, the cases that are still pending?
I would bring cases against the people who put them there, who lied, contrived, broke it's against U.S. statutory law to torture. It's against the Geneva Conventions. We executed all sorts of Germans after World War II, and Japanese. We executed Japanese for waterboarding American soldiers. I think it's more important to protect the principles that protect the liberty of Americans than it is to try to extract some vengeance against somebody who may or may not have been involved in an act of terror.
Well, in the next segment of our interview, let's go a little further, because one of President Obama's first important decisions was not to go after some of the people who ordered torture. He decided not to go prosecute President Bush or Cheney, and we'll ask you for your opinion about that when we rejoin you. So please join us for the second part of our interview with Paul Craig Roberts.